Michelle Miller. Welcome to Eye on America. Today we'll take you to New York for an inside look at a controversial approach to the nation's drug epidemic, and to Florida, where a once thriving oyster population is threatened by climate change. But first, we turn our attention to an issue affecting our nation's military heroes. Female veterans experience post-traumatic stress disorder at almost double the rate of their male counterparts. Chris Van Cleave spoke with a group of veterans raising awareness about mental health struggles.
Charwan Burgos is taking a leap of faith, skydiving with the Army's Golden Knights parachute team. But it's nothing compared to the leap the retired Army major took seeking help for PTSD after deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan.
The hardest part for me was seeking mental health treatment the first time. Sometimes making that first step into a facility or even just seeking treatment is the hardest thing you'll ever do.
These jumps are about raising awareness of the mental health challenges facing women veterans, something former POW Jessica Lynch knows firsthand.
Was it hard to ask for that help?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I felt like my story had been so kind of well known that I didn't want to kind of add on top of what I already went through.
Lynch was taken prisoner after her convoy was ambushed by Iraqi troops in 2003. She was rescued by U.S. Special Forces days later.
It was probably a good 10 years before I even came out and said that I had PTSD. Yeah.
But still, a decade after you got back, you were still dealing with some of the demons.
Yeah. I never really spoke about those inner kind of demons that eat at you.
Nearly 12% of women veterans experience PTSD, almost double the rate of their male counterparts. Women also have higher rates of depression and eating disorders. In 2018, the suicide rate for female vets was almost twice that of women who did not serve. Since retiring from the Army, Burgos has focused on helping her fellow vets get the help they need, working as an outreach director for the Cohen Veterans Network. Its 21 clinics have treated more than 30,000 service members, veterans, and their families.
Sometimes you may have to reach your hand out and grab them through and let them know that it's okay.
While women make up about 10% of all veterans, they are 30% of the vets treated by Cohen.
We think that's because female veterans are more willing to seek treatment.
Tracy Neal Walden is Cohen's chief clinical officer.
Female veterans are very resilient. Oftentimes, there's more of an emphasis on taking care of those other daily needs and taking care of the other people in the family. And so that's why the symptoms may go untreated for many years.
Something these women hope their leaps of faith help change.
We transition now from mental health to physical health with a story on how new technology could help the battle against the next pandemic with the flick of a switch. Dr. John LaPook meets the researchers on a mission to make indoor air safer.
So you plug it into the wall and
Researchers like Don Milton are exploring a new way of using ultraviolet light to make indoor air safer.
It's been known for 80 years or so that ultraviolet light can kill bacteria and inactivate viruses in the air so that they're no longer infectious.
Conventional UVC light has been used extensively in places like hospitals, homeless shelters, and prisons. But that conventional UV light can harm the skin and eyes, so should not be shined directly at people. A shorter wavelength called far UVC can't get past the top layers of the skin or the tear layer of the cornea.
Behind me over here is one of these new fixtures. This is a portable version that was developed actually initially for the Pentagon.
Milton envisions using devices like that or ones mounted in ceilings and pointed downwards.
We could be putting these into places where people gather and reducing the ability of the virus to transmit in these congregate settings.
They're already being used in some restaurants, airports, and buses. The CDC told CBS News that recent research on far UVC has been promising, but more research is needed. The FDA says long-term safety data is lacking.
Do you think it's ready for prime time right now, or does further work need to be done first?
I'm a scientist, and there's always another question I want to answer. But I think the risks are minimal and the advantages of this technology are huge. And so we need to begin using it some more.
promising technology for this and future pandemics.
After the break, a look inside one of the first overdose prevention centers in the nation. The nation's drug epidemic has taken more than 100,000 lives in the past year alone. In response, New York City opened the first 2 overdose prevention centers in the U.S. that actually supervise users of illicit drugs. Dr. Tara Narula shows us how the centers work and why critics have mixed reviews.
At this East Harlem Overdose Prevention Center, Sam Rivera is executive director and guardian angel to many struggling with addiction.
When they use in the street, they're hiding in an alley alone. They're hiding in a bathroom alone. If they overdose, no one's there. You get to respond immediately. And those are key moments because those are moments where some people will say, this is it.
You're the safety net.
Definitely the safety net in the moment while they're in their use.
That safety net is saving lives. On average, more than 2,000 people in New York City die from drug overdoses each year. In just the first 5 months of operation, the 2 centers intervened 283 times without a single death.
Give me a hug too. Oh.
Rivera knows all too well how illegal drugs turn lives upside down.
I created some pain in my own community, and I paid for it.
When Rivera was in his 20s, he spent 5 years behind bars on drug-related charges. In prison, he worked with HIV-positive inmates. That experience changed his life and led him to help other marginalized people using compassion and the concept of harm reduction.
The drug use exists. What we want to do is reduce the harm associated with the drug use.
Clean needles and other supplies reduce the risk of infection. Mirrored booths allow staff to watch for drug reactions.
They're not gonna push the actual drug into you, but they're gonna guide you.
After staying clean for 2 years, Christina Peterson started using heroin again during the pandemic.
They strive to I guess kind of teach people about harm reduction rather than complete abstinence, because that's not really the reality for a lot of people.
These are the overdose carts.
Program Director Kaylin C. says quicker response times allow them the option to use less invasive life-saving measures like nasal naloxone.
We're able to resolve 85% of the overdoses with just oxygen alone, and if we need to, we're just doing micro doses of the injectable naloxone. For those 100,000 plus overdoses America saw last year, if someone was there when it happened, those people wouldn't have died.
Taxpayer dollars cover wellness services, medical care, and connections to rehab. But since the drugs brought in are illegal, only private donations fund the drug supervision area.
For people who say, you're just allowing people to come in and use, you're not getting them help.
We believe that abstinence and harm reduction are partners in this fight against overdose. You cannot recover, you cannot live your life, you cannot do the things you want for yourself if you don't survive an overdose.
Despite resistance from community groups, the program is allowed to operate without raids or arrests. New York City Mayor Eric Adams tells CBS News he supports the centers, and the Department of Justice told us it's evaluating supervised consumption sites as part of an overall approach to harm reduction and public safety.
I've been using heroin and cocaine since I was 16.
Omar Torres says the staff here gives him something he doesn't usually receive: respect.
How often have you been here?
Every day.
Every day.
As long as it's open, because they're not open in the weekends, and I wish it was.
Yeah, why? Why do you wish it was?
Because in the weekends we don't got nowhere to go, so we gotta be in the hallways or in the streets, and people get mad at us, wanna fight us, throw things at us, call us names, and we're not animals, we're actually good people, we just got an addiction,
Sam Rivera wants this facility to serve as a blueprint for other harm reduction centers across the country, to offer more people the same second chance he got.
And to people who say you're bringing drugs into our community, we don't want these centers in our neighborhood.
We're in the neighborhoods we're in because drugs are already here. We're not coming in with them. We're keeping humans alive so they get an opportunity. And I can introduce you to hundreds and thousands who, because of these programs, are still here and are productive members of society.
You're taking something out of the darkness and bringing it into the light.
Yes, lots of light. And, people call it radical and I call it righteous.
We sometimes describe victims of natural and man-made disasters as hanging by a thread. Janet Shamlian met a woman helping survivors one stitch at a time.
For crafters like Ernestine Smith and Trish Henderson, the soul is fed with needle and thread. But the tools that made them so happy were lost after Hurricane Harvey.
Everybody had to get rid of everything, the machines, the fabric, the rulers.
That's when Margaret Jankowski turned up in Houston with 125 brand new machines.
And we gave them out in the parking lot of the center.
The Wisconsin woman started the Sewing Machine Project, which has now given out more than 3,600 new and used machines, helping survivors of disasters like Hurricane Katrina and refugees from Afghanistan and Somalia. Among recipients, a common thread. All are in need.
It made me be able to sew again. It helps you economically and physically and mentally.
You got it down.
I got it down.
A tool that can provide income.
I made this on a machine that was donated.
For those starting over.
Why do you do it? The fact that I can share them with people to whom they make such a difference is life-changing for them and life-changing for me.
A lover of the craft, helping others on the mend.
Oh, that's pretty.
Now to another inspiring story where an inclusive approach is helping employees with autism change the workforce. CBS Chicago's Jim Williams shows us how.
All right, let me see.
Brendan Novak and Brian Evans have jobs that require enormous concentration and precision.
Yes, I see both of those values.
Okay, so we'll move on.
Perfect.
They comb through reams of data, making sure it's accurate for Grainger, the large industrial supply company with offices here at Chicago's Merchandise Mart.
And the most important thing about the data being accurate is that the customers have the right information.
If it's something like a screw, we're looking at what direction does the thread go. So does it go to the right? Does it go to the left? Various details, things you wouldn't even think about.
I've been with Grainger for 12 years.
Paige Robbins, Grainger's president of business units,
1 1/8,
tells us in Brennan and Brian's work, the stakes are high.
We are a huge company with millions of products and millions of customers. You can just imagine how much information that we have.
These two young men with demanding jobs both have autism.
There's many benefits to hiring people with autism, and with some additional training time, they can be as good as or even better than people without a disability.
That is the very message Dave Friedman is sharing with the world. 10 years ago, he founded Autonomy Works, based in suburban Chicago, to create job opportunities for people with autism.
A big part of our mission as a company is to change the way the world views people with autism, and getting in front of millions of people and being able to tell our story is a really critical part of what we're trying to do.
I was unemployed for 3 years.
Millions saw the story of Dave's company on 60 Minutes last year.
More companies are discovering the potential of people with autism.
After the piece ran, we got hundreds and hundreds of inquiries.
Grainger was so impressed by the 60 Minutes segment, which by the way featured Brennan and Brian.
It is a great story.
They reached out to Autonomy Works,
right,
and soon a partnership was born.
The folks that are employed by Autonomy Works have skills and capabilities about attention to detail, focus, being able to look at large quantities of data that was really necessary for us.
Dave's motivation is personal. His son Matt has autism.
The job has really given him sort of a whole nother purpose in life.
He's now working for Dad's company.
Do you like the job?
Yeah. I like that it's a quiet office environment.
Back when he was in high school, we started to think about what he might do after high school. And what we realized is that there are very, very few jobs for adults with autism.
The unemployment rate for adults with autism, Dave says, is around 80%.
And I knew that wasn't because they didn't have skills. Matt's really talented at a lot of things. And that was what inspired me to start the company, to connect people with those skills to the business world.
Okay. Connecting men like Brennan Novak and Brian Evans, who are enjoying their work and providing an invaluable service to a big company.
I feel very satisfied knowing that we're doing the most accurate work possible for the client.
It has been just a really great partnership.
It's one of my favorite things. I've become a happier person since I've started working at Autonomy Works, and this work has given me something to look forward to every single day.
Every day?
Yeah.
Not a lot of people can say that in their jobs.
No, it's truly a blessing.
Coming up, a growing threat against the once thriving population of oysters. This is Eye on America. Down the Florida coastline, oysters are a subtle yet powerful force of nature. But experts discovered a sort of tug of war going on beneath the surface. Lonnie Quinn explains.
This is Mosquito Lagoon. It is a picture of tranquility. Dolphins swimming by and wading birds just watching over things.
Many say it is the most biologically diverse estuary on the mainland United States.
Linda Walters would know. The University of Central Florida professor has been studying these waters for 24 years with a focus on the eastern oyster.
They're superstars. There is no question about that. They can handle all sorts of climatic conditions.
Do you think people around the world don't have an appreciation for an oyster?
I think everybody could do a little bit better in appreciating oysters.
They're not the prettiest animal in the ocean.
They don't have to be pretty, they just have to do a really important job.
That job is filtering water. Yes, they look like rocks, but these are actually clusters of oysters. And each oyster sucks in 20 gallons of water every day filled with algae and muck, and eventually spits out cleaner and clearer water.
Oh, everybody should care about oysters. It's just that simple. They are one of the most important species on this planet for keeping our water clean.
I see why you told me to wear an old pair of sneakers. These things are like razor blades.
Since 1943, Mosquito Lagoon has lost 40% of its oyster reefs within the boundaries of Canaveral National Seashore. Much of that due to boat wakes that dislodge the oysters.
I see the healthy part of the oyster reef, which is this dark color.
Yep.
And right here where it's white, this is dead, correct?
That's dead, and that's boat wake impacts.
Walters had to help. She and her team have restored more than 6% of the reefs. But now, there's a new threat. Mangroves are encroaching, the consequence of warming waters.
It gets probably close to 95, 96 in these sorts of,
95
shallow
degrees
areas.
Here. Let me tell you, Linda, we put bubbles in here, we got a jacuzzi.
And that's how the mangrove trees prefer it. Red mangroves will die when the air temperatures dip below 24 degrees. That's known as a hard freeze, and it prevents the trees from moving to the north. But this area has not had one of those in decades.
Now, over the last 20 years, the oysters and the mangroves are competing for the same land, and the oysters are losing that battle. This is a dead reef, but the mangroves, they have blown up. They have gone up by 198%.
Now, that may not be a bad thing. Mangroves remove carbon from the air. They also provide a buffer during storms. But in this turf war, Professor Walters is rooting for the oyster.
So in terms of climate change, we always talk about the average mean temperature increasing, but for you, you're focusing on that morning low temperature not getting down as cold as it's been in the past.
Yeah, that is a new field of research that's called tropicalization, and we're finding it for lots of plants, lots of animals.
A single mangrove tree produces hundreds to thousands of propagules. These are pre-germinated seeds that look a little like a green bean. They float on the water and can root on an oyster reef.
What you can see right here is a new propagule. So this would have just shown up here and gotten trapped amongst these clusters probably within the last 2 weeks. And this other one here is probably 20 years old at this point. And you can see that other new mangroves are starting to grow right underneath this. They're just going to take up more and more of the oyster reef as they all start growing.
It looks like they coexist nicely, but the mangroves may be causing the oysters to die off. UCF graduate student Catherine Harris says it's likely it has something to do with the chemistry of the trees.
Mangroves basically contribute to much more acidic levels in the sediment, and over time that maybe starts to dissolve the oyster shells and weaken the shells, which makes, the base that the oysters will grow on go away.
One solution is for man to step in and make more bases. This restored reef is a series of grids that are made, believe it or not, from potato chip waste.
So that's made out of potatoes.
That's made out of potatoes. It is a starch material that is considered a bioplastic.
And these containers, they shore up the reef. Each one is filled with about 30 pounds of recycled oyster shells from restaurants.
So we're keeping all of the oysters out of landfills while creating new oyster habitats and putting them back out into the lagoon.
Jesse Wales of the Marine Discovery Center says the recycled oyster shells act like a magnet and attract tiny baby oysters to latch on.
Since oysters are made out of calcium carbonate, as they leach off that calcium carbonate, baby oysters can sense it in the water, and they will actually find these oyster bags and attach onto them.
Now, what pile are we digging from?
It's a simple process that kind of doubles as cardio.
Go ahead and dump that baby right in. Keep shaking it out, tamp it on the ground, and we only need 1,399 more to go.
To date, the Marine Discovery Center has recycled more than 700,000 pounds of oyster shells.
So this entire back parking lot is going to be full of oyster bags by the time we're done.
The center also restored this marsh. Now, they intended for it to be a marsh grass nursery, but mangroves took over here too. They got so thick, we had to back out.
Where do the mangroves stop? Like, they don't go farther north than where?
If you look at a textbook that's like 10 years old, right here in Mosquito Lagoon used to be the stop point for mangroves. At least for one species of mangroves, red mangroves. And it used to be St. Augustine, which is about 70 miles north of here, for black mangroves. Now you see both species up into Georgia.
Where do you think they could be, let's say 10 years from now?
10 years from now, I think North and South Carolina are going to have a lot more mangroves than they do now, which they pretty much have none right now. And you will see the propagules, the seeds, floating in the water much further north because they won't be dying on the way there.
Now, no one can say for sure what that will mean for coastal areas in the mid and the North Atlantic, but right here in Mosquito Lagoon, Professor Walters, she finds plenty of hope.
Well, with everything that's taken place out here and having spent my entire day with you, you haven't stopped smiling the whole day. For some reason, you feel good about things, not bad about things.
If you're going to feel bad about it, you just have to find another job. There is so much willpower in the United States and around the globe to make our estuaries better. Lots of people want to understand the problem, they want to help the problem, and they want to correct it for the future generations.
For more stories like these and live coverage of breaking news 24/7, stream us right here on CBS News. I'm Michelle Miller. Thank you for watching Eye on America.